Hey everyone, this is Saurabh Maurya and once welcome you all in Lingualit Capital. So dear friends, in this lecture we will talk about one of the very important term from linguistics, especially from neurolinguistics, that is brain and language. This is a very important term from neurolinguistics, and in this discussion we will talk about how the language is connected with the brain. Generally, we do everything, we speak, we communicate with everyone, we call to anyone, we do any kind of the action in our routine life. We just play the cricket, we play everything, we do every kind of the action, but we never think about this point that how does all these actions are going on, and what is the roles of our brain in all these actions. We never think about these points. We only just do every kind of the actions. So here in this lecture we will talk about all those phenomena, all those roles that are going to be play in these fields. Generally this happens with everyone, that if we just give the name of a disease, if we have, if there is happening something to or with anyone, if anybody is lost the communication, then we just give a name that that person, due to this disease, that person lost this kind of communication. Communication can be lost with any kind of like that. Some person can lose their vowel sounds, some person lost their consonant sounds, some person can lose their ability to speak, some person can lose their ability to speak the correct words. Some persons can be, can produce the grammatical sentence in with repeated sounds. So there are many kind of the losses, and these all kind of the losses that are going to be happen or that is happening, that is caused by the stroke in our brain, that is caused by the injury in our brain, and that can be of anything. And sometimes this happens with us, that there is a kind of a disease which is known to be the paralysis. If someone gets the paralysis, then it is assumed that due to the weakness of the body, that person get paralyzed, or due to this that person got paralyzed. We just gave any kind of superstitious name, but this does not happen this with with that. But what happens in this case, if you lost the right side of the body, then it means you lost the left side of the brain. You lost the left hemisphere of the brain. So in this all the actions, in this all the causes, somehow the brain plays an important role. So in this lecture we will talk about the brain and language. It means how the language is connected with the brain. So here we will talk about brain and language. When do I talk about brain and language, it means here we will discuss about how the language is connected with the brain. This term somehow relates to neurolinguistics. Somehow relates to neurolinguistics, which is the biological and neural foundation of language. So in this phenomena, brain and language, we will talk about how the language is connected with the brain. As we all know that the brain is the most complex organ of the body. The brain is the most complex organ of the body, and it lies under the skull where 100 millions of the neurons and 100 millions of the fibers are present, which are interconnected with them. When do we talk about brain, the surface of the brain is known as the cortex. When do I talk about brain, the surface of the brain is known as the cortex, which is the decision making organ of the body. When do I talk about cortex, the cortex is the decision making organ of the body. This question has been asked several times in the exam, that which part of our brain is known to be the decision making organ of the body, then your answer should be the cortex. The cortex is the surface of the brain, which is the decision making organ of the body. In this part, cortex, this receives the message from all the sensory organs. Cortex receives the message from all the sensory organs, where all the voluntary and involuntary actions are produced. Okay. So here, what happens in this case, when do I talk about the cortex, then cortex is known as the decision making organ of the body, and also it is known as the storehouse of our brain, means our storehouse of our memories. Like in the cell phone we have the memories, which is known as the chip, and in the chip we just transfer every of the materials. This works as a output and it is entered as the input. But what happens in our brain, there is a part which is known as the cortex, which is the surface of the brain. So the cortex is known as the decision making organ of the body, and also it is known as the storehouse of our memories. Storehouse of our memories. So here now we will talk about that the brain is composed of a cerebral hemisphere. The brain is composed of a cerebral hemisphere, where one part is known to be the left hemisphere and another part is known to be the right hemisphere. And in this there is a part which is known to be this is the right hemisphere, and this is known as the left hemisphere. So what happens here, this part which is joined by these two This is known as the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the grey matter. Which is a grey matter and which is joined by the corpus. Grey matter which is joined, which is known as the corpus callosum. Means the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere is connected or joined with the corpus callosum, which is a grey matter. Okay. So one thing, sometimes this happens in the cases or in the disease of paralysis, when the left side of our body damaged or stops the actions, then there is a term which is known as the split brain. What happens in this case? There is a term split brain. Split brain. What happens in a split brain? In a split brain, the doctors cut the one part from this corpus callosum, due to which one part of the body stops all the voluntary actions. If our left side or left part of our body damaged, then the doctors cut the right side of the hemisphere which is interlinked or connected with the corpus callosum. Okay? So what happens here? This is the left hemisphere and this is the right hemisphere. In these two hemispheres, there is a part which is known as the corpus callosum, which is a grey matter, which is work as the connecting of these two hemispheres. So now we will talk about what is the role of these two hemispheres, which is left and right. If I am writing with this hand, it means that our left hemisphere is responsible or is responding to do the action with the right hand. Must remember that if we do any kind of the action with our right hand, then in doing the action of our right hand, the left hemisphere plays the role. And if we are doing the work with our left hand, then it means that our right hemisphere is responsible in all these actions. So the term that is given for this action is known as the contralateral. We have a new term which is known as the contralateral. The term contralateral means if we do any kind of the action with our left hand, or then it means that our right hemisphere is responsible for this work, and if we are doing any kind of work with our right hand, then it means that our left hemisphere is responsible for this work. This is a term which is known as the contralateral. One thing, remember that when you do any kind of communication with anyone, that is grammatical or ungrammatical, however, then the language faculty which is present, that is present in the left hemisphere. It means all the language faculty that exists in the left hemisphere, and what happens in the right hemisphere, if there is a damage of our right hemisphere of our brain, it means we lose the metaphors. Metaphors in the sense, Suppose that if we speak any of the proverb, just like the walls have the ear. It means the wall can listen to us what we are communicating with each other. It means if you have an injury in your right hemisphere, then you lost the metaphors. Okay? So now here we are talking about this is the left hemisphere, which is responsible for all the kind of the actions which are, coming in our mind to communicate with each other. Next, what is that? We have a term that is localization. We have a term that is localization. The localization means that the human cognitive abilities and behavior have some specific type of, or we can say have the abilities and the behavior in the some specific locations, which is, it means that according to Franz Joseph Gall, he has proposed the model of the localization, and according to Franz Joseph Gall, he proposed that in every part of our body, the language is situated or localized in our brain, and for every kind of the actions there is a what do we say, that every there is a part in our brain which is responsible for, different parts of our brain is responsible for different kind of the language faculties. Generally we can understand in this way that according to Franz Joseph Gall, whatever our cognitive minds and the behaviors are present in our body, for all these actions, the different part of the different part of the brains. The different what we say, the different part, or we can say the different locations of our brain is responsible for all those kind of the faculties. Okay. So here now, the term Franz localization was proposed by Franz Joseph Gall. Franz Joseph Gall is the scientist who gave the term aphasia. According to Franz Joseph Gall, the language is situated in the frontal part of our brain. So, in localization, there is a scientist whose name is Franz Joseph Gall, who proposed about the localization, that the language faculty, whatever the language faculty or communication areas in our brain that they are present is in the frontal lobes. Is in the frontal lobe of the brain. Okay. So now we will talk about aphasia here, where we will talk about the two kind of the two scientists, which is the most famous, and here in this lecture also we will discuss about the two kind of the aphasia, which is special and very important with the exam perspective. So here there is a person, there is a scientist whose name is Paul Broca. The scientist Paul Broca, according to Paul Broca, he gave the aphasia, he has given a name, that is Broca's aphasia. And according to Paul Broca, he proposed that the language is localized in the left hemisphere of the brain, and especially in the frontal part of the brain. According to Paul Broca, A language is situated in the right hemisphere of the brain, and especially in the frontal lobe of the brain, whereas there is a scientist whose name is Carl Wernicke. According to Carl Wernicke, there is an area in our brain that is known as the Wernicke's area, which is according to Carl Wernicke, the language is located, in the Wernicke's area, which is known as the temporal lobe of the brain. So generally we can say that according to Carl Wernicke, the language is presented, the communication or language is presented in the temporal lobe of the brain. So this is all about the language aphasia, that if there is the injuries in our brain in the left hemisphere of the frontal part of the brain, that it means when the frontal part of our brain is damaged, then in that case what happens that there is the Broca's aphasia. According to Paul Broca, there is a name that is given as the Broca's aphasia. Broca's aphasia. What is aphasia? When do we talk about aphasia? Then aphasia means when, due to the injuries in our brain, if any part of our brain gets damaged, or due to injuries there is any issues in our brain, there is any kind of the stroke in any part of our brain, then we get lost something in our body. We can paralyze also, we can lose our communication skills also, we can lose our grammatical skills also, we can lose the vowel sounds also, we can lose the consonant sounds also, we can lose the ability of reading also, we can lose the ability of writing also, we can lose the ability to identify someone also. There can be any kind of a loss in our body when we get stroke in our mind. So what happens here, when we get a stroke in the frontal part of our brain, that is which is especially known as the frontal lobe, if due to the injuries the frontal lobe gets damaged, then this is known to be the Broca's aphasia. And what happens in the Broca's aphasia is that the language is produced is often grammatic, and it lacks the articles grammatic, and it lacks the articles, the prepositions. Sometimes this happens that in naming of the word, if a person who has the injuries in the Broca's area, then that person causes the loss of the articles, prepositions, nouns, somehow adjectives, and in naming in identifying the person's name. So he has to issue something like that. Okay? Like if we are calling to someone that I am something like that, we just lost the grammatical things. And what happens in the Wernicke's aphasia, there is a aphasia which is known as the Wernicke's aphasia. Wernicke's aphasia. What happens in Wernicke's aphasia? In Wernicke's aphasia of the brains, if a person gets the injury in the temporal lobe of our brain, then he loses. There is no any issue in the communication. He speaks fluently, grammatically. But what happens in the Wernicke's aphasia? That person gives the repeated sound. It means if he is using the grammatical positions like am, something like that, then he use am, something like that. So he just does the repeated actions in when the Wernicke, there is a Wernicke's aphasia. There is a strokes in the temporal portion of our brain. Okay. Next, we have one more, that is dyslexia. We have one more point which is known as the dyslexia. In the case of dyslexia, the person lost the ability of the writing. Dyslexia, the loss of ability to reading. We have a word that is dysgraphia. Dysgraphia, that person lost the ability of the writing. And we have a word that is anomia. In anomia, that person lost the ability, that the word which he want to speak. Dyslexia, lost the ability in reading. We have dysgraphia, lost the ability in writing, and the last one that we have, that is anomia. Anomia means the word which the speaker wish to speak. This is especially happens with every one of us, that whatever the word you want to speak to someone, but you forget that. So this case happens. It means you have a disease of anomia, which means you want to speak that word, but in that same situation that word didn't come in your mind. So this is all about the language, the brain and language, which has a interlinked connections. I hope this video you impact, and please, it's request to all of you that kindly share as much as possible. And one important thing is that we have launched one of the classes, that is spoken classes. For everyone, there is not a specific for a specific classes, that there is a specific class for that person, and that is only eligible for that person. This spoken class is especially for everyone, and where in this class we will teach the English grammar so deeply with the linguistics point of view, and we will talk about everything what happens with the language faculty and the in communication area. So there is so less fees and less charges. If you want to join, then contact us. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you so much.